Welcome to Sum It Up on this April 27th, 2022. This is the Sum It Up following my video sermon from April 24th. As my family's been dealing with COVID, I'm making videos about sermons I preached via video. Last week was the beginning of a new message series called My Hope is in You. That sermon can be found at kenwoodsermons.blogspot.com, or you can go to kenwoodchurch.org and find that as well. The message was about Psalm chapter 6 and how David was dealing with grief. And grief is a subject I think most all of us have been touched by at one point or another. The truth is, you live long enough in this world and you're going to go through grief. Crises come in any different shape and form. I think the topic I'd like to talk about from the message today is how our bodies and minds respond to grief. One of the things I looked at from that psalm was how you go through fatigue, tears, sorrow, and fears, and how grief will just weigh you down and take all the life and energy out of you. How it'll produce tears to where they just flow. I know some people get confused when they're in the midst of grief and they can't cry. Well, they're just at a point to where they're not flowing. They'll come. And sorrow, that deep sorrow that hits you to the bone. Grief can leave you in a place to where sadness seems to be your reality. And then finally, fears. Grief can really play on those things that you're concerned about, worried about, ruminating on. For many of us, as we go through grief, that's what happens. We start thinking about everything in the world that can go wrong, not be right, and we can focus on that. In the midst of this psalm, David remembers that his God is with him. His God will rescue him. That's the only thing that changes in this psalm. His situation doesn't change. The grief doesn't get better. He just remembers that God's with him. And you and I always need to remember that God's with us. In the midst of the fatigue and the tears and the sorrow and the fears, our God is there with us. My hope is in you. God bless.